أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق وقاتل ما سبق ناس الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حقا قدر دار أما بعد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ولي الذي يا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري ولو أقتد من نصر يفقه قولي ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله ولي الذي أما بعد. I greet you with the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuhu. And I'm greeting you on this blessed month of Muharram. We are getting very close to the 10th of Muharram. Inshallah, tomorrow will be the 10th of Muharram. We'll be fasting. Some Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to fast on the 10th of Muharram, but sometimes the 9th and the 10th or the 10th and 11th. Fasting another day with the 10th. And the reason why is because he found the Jews fast on the 10th of Muharram, and when he asked them why, they said this is the day when we was freed from captivity. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed them that we have more rights to Prophet Musa than you. So he started to fast that day as well. But to make it different from the fasting of the Jews, he fasted another day. So either you do the 9th or the 10th, so you could do today or tomorrow, and then or tomorrow and the day after. Now, also in the 10th of Muharram, our Shia brothers reflected on the life of Hussain and the martyrdom of Hussain. Imam Hussain alayhi salam, who is the grandson of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who is the son of Ali radiallahu anh, and also Fatima radiallahu anha, Fatima Zahra, who is the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This was one of the most evil acts that were done in history of Islam. But not only that, one of the biggest tragedies done in Islam. And to reflect and for you to just to understand, we know that our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the mercy to the world, and he's the one who brought us Islam. And he is the one that all of us, we all follow and we all claim to love. Well, this is his grandson. And this is the grandson that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to love so much that even if he was giving a khutbah on a Friday and he would see them, Hussain and Hussain walking, he would come down to pick them up. And when he was praying, when they were younger, when he used to pray, they used to climb over his body. And sometimes he would stay in sujood for a long time so that they could have a good time of playing. So the love that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for his grandchildren was immense. That's why it makes this killing of the grandson just unbelievable. How could somebody who claims to be a Muslim, claims to be a lover of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have anything to do with this? With the martyrdom of the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is why it's very, very sad, and it's something that every Muslim, Sunni, Shia, Tasawwuf, Sufi, any Muslim, they should remember this day and reflect on this day. Many, many lessons. So let's go a little bit deeper into what happened at this time. Hussain, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, the righteous, the knowledgeable, the pious, the son of Sayyidi Ali radiallahu anh, the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He actually refused to bow to worldliness and power at a time when the Ummah was becoming corrupt. At a time when the Ummah, one of the biggest challenges that we had as the Muslims was the introduction of wealth. when the Muslims were getting more and more powerful and conquering more and more lands, the wealth followed, and the Muslims became extremely wealthy. And many surahs in the Quran, they tell us about wealth and the problems of wealth, and to be careful of wealth, because wealth can take you far away from Allah, far away from the teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It can keep you far off track. You know, my Shaykh teaches, Imam Tijani's teacher, and he teaches us that keep wealth in your hands, but your heart, keep your heart open for Allah and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Know that wealth is a test. Anyway, so at this time there was corruption in the Ummah, worldliness, love of dunya, and corrupt leaders. So in the 60th year of the Hijrah, the leader of the Muslim was Yazid. He assumed power at Damascus. He cared nothing for the most sacred ideals of the people. He was not interested in the ordinary business affairs of administration. His passion was hunting, and he sought power for self-gratification. His father, Muawiyah, is the one that said after him, he gave power to his son, which is unfortunate. Many of the scholars, they don't like to say anything about Muawiyah, because they say that he was a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this son of his is very clear. Everyone has agreed that this wasn't a pious person. This wasn't somebody that should be put in power to lead the Ummah, to lead the Muslims. It's agreed. The discipline, the strong faith and earnest endeavour, the freedom and sense of social equality which had been the forces of Islam were divorced from power. The throne of Damascus had become a worldly throne, based on the most selfish ideas of personal and family aggrandizement instead of spiritual office with a sense of God-given responsibility. The decay of morals spread among the people. It's emphasizing here that now the leadership of the Islam, it wasn't based on righteousness. We had Abu Bakr Siddiq, al-Kitab, Uthman bin Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib, righteous people that were striving for righteousness. And now we were having leaders who were more focused on enjoying the dunya and just living a good life. So in this time of corruption, in this time when more people were when the Muslims were becoming more and more corrupt, there was still a shining light in the deen. There was still a shining light. And this was Imam Hussain, radiallahu anhu, alayhi salam. There was one man who could stem the tide, Imam Hussain. He is the grandson of our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and could speak without fear, for fear was foreign to his nature. So meaning that he would speak the truth. Wherever he saw evil, he would tell you it was evil. He would speak the truth. But his blameless and irreproachable life was in itself a reproach to those who had other standards. They sought to silence him, but he could not be silenced. They sought to bribe him, but he could not be bribed. They sought to waylay him and get him into their power. What is more, they wanted him to recognize their tyranny and expressly to support it. For they knew that the conscience of the people might awaken at any time and sweep them away unless the holy man supported their cause. The holy man was prepared to die rather than surrender the principles for which he stood. This happened many times where you see in Islam where you still had righteous people, but the righteous people, they would hide away from the leadership because they knew that the leadership was corrupt, so they would hide themselves. But the interesting thing about Imam Hussain, alayhi salam, what we're learning here is that he is someone that he would speak the truth. And even today, when you reflect on today's times, we're living in a time where to speak the truth is becoming very difficult. Just like the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there will come a time when to hold on to the deen would be like holding on to burning coal, and to let go would be like, the coal will still be burning you. Also, we're living in a time when truth is becoming hidden, when truth is been taken hostage, where you see corrupt people in power. You even see corrupt scholars who are speaking, but they're full of nafs. They're following their lower desires. This is why we have all these problems, with affairs, paedophilia, sexual abuse, all these kind of cases coming out now. We have corrupt leaders around the world who don't care about their people, but care more about power and money. This is the situation that we're in today. People can see falsehood happening and they keep quiet. Medina, Imam Hussain, he was teaching in Medina. Medina was the center of Hussein's teaching. They made Medina impossible for him. The people that were against him, that wanted him to surrender to them, they made Medina impossible for him. So he left Medina and he went to Mecca, hoping that they would leave him alone. But he was not left alone. The Syrian forces invaded Mecca. The invasion was repelled not by Hussein, but by other people. For Hussein, though, the bravest of the brave, had no army and had no worldly weapons. So even though Imam Hussein was a very brave person, he had no army, he had no weapons. He was just a pious man. His existence itself was an offense in the eyes of his enemies. His life was in danger, and the lives of all those nearest and dearest to him. At this time, when there was no support for him, he started to receive letters from Kufa. And hundreds of letters of people in Kufa pledging allegiance to him, pledging support to him, begging him, please come to Kufa. We will support you. We will be around you. Please come to Kufa and bring the shining light with you, the light of the deen with you. And so more and more of these letters came to Imam Hussain. He asked advice from many of the, some of the Sahaba that were still around at that time, some of his family members and people that he respected. He asked them for advice. What should he do? And all of them said to him, no, don't go. Don't go. Stay here. Don't go. He had friends everywhere, but they were afraid to speak out. They were not as brave as he was. But in distant Kufa, a party grew up which said, we are disgusted with what is happening in the Ummah, and we must have you, Imam Hussain, to take asylum with us. So they sent and invited the Imam to leave Mecca. Come, live with us, live in our midst, and be honoured. Be our honoured teacher and our honoured guide. His father's memory was held in reverence in Kufa. The governor of Kufa was friendly and the people eager to welcome him. But it said at this time when all this was happening, Yazid had found out about this and wanted to make sure that this wouldn't happen. Alas, Kufa had neither strength nor courage nor constancy. Kufa, geographically only 40 miles from Karbala, was the occasion of the tragedy of Karbala, and now Kufa is nearly gone and Karbala remains as the lasting memory of the martyrdom. When the invitation reached the Imam, he asked his friends, and his friends advised him not to go. As I said, he sent his cousin Muslim to study the situation on the spot and report to him. So he sent his cousin in front to go and see what the situation was like. He got a report back. The report back said it was good and you could come. He had strong belief that it was good. But as soon as he had sent the letter, the situation on the ground in Kufa started to change. But could he abandon his mission? When Kufa was calling for it, he went. And the people that went with him to support him were his family. So Imam Hussain, he left with family members, about 100 of them altogether, they left. some say 92, they left. They travelled together. Even though some advised him not to go, he still went. He deterred. He said, no, he's going to go. He said that there's people in Kufa, they're calling me, they need my help, I'm going to go and support them. And then it was suggested that he leave his family behind, but his family said, no, if you're going to go, we are going with you. So they all went together. It was a united family, preeminent in purity of its life and its domestic virtues and domestic affections. If there was danger for its head, the whole would share it. The Imam was not going on a mere ceremonial visit. There was responsible work to do, and they must be by his side to support him in spite of all its perils and consequences. Now, there's been some critics who've actually criticised the Imam, saying, he did this for political reasons. But would a man with a political ambition march without any army against what might be called the enemy country? Would he do that? Someone who really wanted power, would he just go with just his family and no army to protect him? So while he was travelling on the journey to Kufa, he met a poet. He met a poet who had come from Kufa, and he asked him about the situation. And the poet said, the heart of the city is with thee, but its sword is with thy enemies, and the issue is with God. What was to be done? So now this was a clear warning for him that things are not as they seem. There's problems ahead. Okay, things are not looking good. There are people that supported you, but they're weak, and the ones who are against you are strong. So this is a kind of signs that he was getting, but they still carried on. So next, messengers came from Kufa, and Imam Hussain was asked to surrender. Imam Hussain offered to take one of the three alternatives. He wanted no political power and no revenge. He said, I came to defend my own people. If I am too late, give me the choice of three alternatives, either go back to Mecca or face Yazid himself at Damascus, or if my very presence is distasteful to him and you, I do not wish to cause more division among the Muslims. Let me at least go to a distant frontier where if fighting must be done, I will fight against the enemies of Islam. So these are all different options that he was giving them so they could choose one. They refused all of them. What they wanted was to destroy his life, or better still, to get him to surrender. Their main aim was to get him to pledge allegiance to Yazid, because they knew that he was a righteous man. They knew that this is the blood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They knew that he had the heart of the believers was with him. So if they could get him to pledge allegiance to Yazid, then Yazid would be the complete outright ruler. But Imam Hussain, as we said earlier, he was a man of truth. He's a man of piousness. He is his father's child. Ali radiallahu anhu, who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I am the house of knowledge, Ali is the gates. And this is the grandson of the beloved of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would not sell himself short. He would not put his head down and say, yes, I accept being a follower of somebody who he knew was an enemy of Islam. He would not change his stance, even though he knew that he was in a really extremely dangerous situation. He had no fear. His fear, the only person he feared was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course he did not surrender, but what did he do? He had no army. He had no reason to suppose that many of his friends from distant parts would rally around him and come and defend him with their swords and bodies. But time was necessary, and he was not going to gain time. He turned a little around to the left, the way that would have led him to Yazid himself, at Damascus. He camped in the plain of Kabbalah. Later on, they were there for 10 days. One of the evil things that they did to them, to the founder of the Prophet ﷺ, is that they cut off the water. Because imagine they were in the middle of the desert, the heat is down on them, they had no place for shelter, and there was water around, but they cut off the water to basically to make them dehydrated. For 10 days, messages passed between and forward between Kabbalah and Kufa. Kufa wanted surrender and recognition. That was the one thing that Imam could not consent to. Every other alternative was refused by Kufa under the instructions from Damascus. Under the instruction from Damascus, which is where Yazid is. Those faithful 10 days were the first 10 days of Muharram, of the year 61, the year of Hijrah. The final crisis was on the 10th of Muharram, which is known as Ashura. This is the day that when we're fasting. So, as I said earlier, it is a day where we're remembering that the Jews were freed at that time, but also it is a day of the terrible, the evil murdering martyrdom of Imam Hussain. During the first 7 days, various kinds of pressures were brought to bear on the Imam, but his will was inflexible. It was not a question of a fight, for there was but 70 men against 4,000. The little band was surrounded and insulted, but they held together so firmly that they could not be harmed. On the 8th day, the water supply was cut off. The Euphrates and its abundant streams were within sight, but the way was barred. Prodigies of valor were performed in getting water. Challenges were made for single combat according to Arab custom, and the enemies were half-hearted, while the Imam's men fought in contempt of death and always accounted for more men than they lost. On the evening of the 9th day, the little son of Imam was ill. He had a fever and was dying of thirst. They tried to get a drop of water, but that was refused, point blank. And so they made the resolve that they would rather than surrender die to the last man in the cause for which they had come. Imam Hussain offered to send away his people. He realized that this is like he's staring death in the eyes, and he tried to send away his family, but his family, they refused. They said, "We are staying with you." They, after my person, my family, and my people can go back, but they refused. They said they would stand to the last. They were not cowards. They were soldiers born and bred, and they fought as heroes with devotion and chivalry. The final agony. The final agony, placid face of the man of Allah on the day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. Imam Hussain alayhi salam's own person was surrounded by his enemies. He was brave to the last. He was cruelly mutilated. His sacred head was cut off in the act of prayer. A mad orgy of triumph was celebrated over his body. He had 45 wounds from the enemy's swords and javelins, and 35 arrows pierced his body. His left arm was cut off, and a javelin pierced through his breast. After all the agony, when his head was lifted up on a spear, his face was the placid face of a man of Allah. All the men of that gallant band were exterminated and their bodies trampled underfoot by the horses. The only male survivor was a child, Hussain, son Ali, surname Zain Abidin, the glory of the devout. He lived in retirement, studying, interpreting, and teaching his father's high spiritual principles for the rest of his life. Very sad story. So what lessons can we get from this very sad story? One clear lesson is we see the martyrdom of the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And anyone who could have love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could never be involved in killing his grandson. This is the blood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The blood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam runs in the blood of Imam Hussain. This is the first lesson. The second is, you could see Imam Hussain, he stood for truth. He was a man of truth. He was a man of piety. He was a man of righteousness. He stood for truth. But falsehood is what killed him. Evil is what killed him. Also at this time, what we can reflect on is that every Muslim that was alive at that time did not stand up for Imam Hussain. All of the army, the soldiers that were fighting so many wars against the non-Muslims, they were not standing with Imam Hussain to protect him from this evil. And even today we can see the same, where you see many Muslim leaders and they see a lot of evil happening in the world and they don't say anything. They keep quiet. They don't speak. And the reason why they don't speak, they know what they're seeing is evil, but they're thinking about their own success. They're thinking, well, if we say something, then we're going to make enemies of people. We don't want them to be our enemies, so let's just stay quiet. This is the time that we're living in now. We're in a time where people, they don't want to speak the truth. They keep quiet. We're in a time where we have rulers that are corrupt. We have poor people that are suffering. We have rich people in power squandering the money. We have leaders that lie constantly. This is the time that we're living in. And there is a hadith of our beloved Messenger Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He talked about a time near the end of the time. He says there'll be a time when Muslims will be persecuted all over the world. They'll be persecuted and the enemies will be cutting up their lands like cake and taking their share. And the Sahaba, the companions were confused. They said, Ya Rasulullah, why would this happen? How can this happen? Will the Muslims be few in number? And he said, no, there will not be few. There will be many. There will be many in number, but they will have love of life and love of the dunya. So they will have weak Imam because of love of the dunya and love of life. So this is the situation that we're in, and these are some of the lessons that we can take from it. And may Allah help us to always try to stand for truth. May Allah help us always to have love for the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though there's many companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is many family members that are alive now. Even my grand Sheikh, Sheikh Ahmad Tijani, and he's a descendant of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have many descendants of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who are doing good work. It's very important that we show respect to the family, the blood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. الفاتح المغلق وقاتل لما سبق الناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حقا قدر مقدار العظيم. May Allah bless us. May Allah forgive us. May Allah help us to fast on the 10th of Muharram. May Allah help us to remember this terrible day. What happened to Imam Hussain alayhi salam, the blood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may Allah help us always to be people that are righteous. Forgive us for our sins. Anything good is from Allah. Anything bad is from our own nafs. قولي قولي هذا واستغفر الله واتوب إليه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.